was a crisp October night in 2002 when Emily stepped out of her apartment, her heart brimming with excitement. Her 21st birthday was supposed to be unforgettable. She wore the red dress Alex had once said was his favorite, pairing it with the silver necklace her grandmother had given her years ago. Alex, her boyfriend of 2 years, had promised her a special evening. As the son of a prominent judge, Alex always seemed to live life on a different plane: money, connections, and privilege. He had it all. But Emily, with her small-town charm and unshakable optimism, had always believed their love was genuine, untouched by the shadows of Alex's complicated world. Alex arrived late as usual. The roar of his black BMW filled the quiet street and Emily's smile faltered. She could sense something was off. The car swerved slightly as he pulled up, and when he stepped out, the scent of alcohol hit her like a wave. His eyes, bloodshot and cold, scanned her from head to toe. "You're wearing that?" he muttered, his tone laced with disdain. Emily's heart sank, but she brushed it aside, determined not to let his mood ruin her night. They drove to an upscale restaurant downtown, the kind of place Emily could never afford on her own. The atmosphere was tense. Alex kept checking his phone, his responses curt and dismissive. When Emily tried to lighten the mood by reminiscing about their first date, he cut her off with a sharp, "Can we not do this right now?" By the time dessert arrived, Emily had lost her appetite. She stared at the untouched slice of cake as Alex drained his third glass of whiskey. On the drive home, the silence was deafening. Emily watched the city lights blur past, her mind racing with questions she was too afraid to ask. Alex's knuckles were white on the steering wheel, his jaw clenched. When they reached her apartment, he didn't even bother to park properly. The car stopped abruptly, the tires screeching against the pavement. Emily hesitated, her hand on the door handle. "Why, Alex, is everything okay?" she ventured cautiously. He didn't answer. Instead, he lit a cigarette, the flame illuminating his face in the darkness. "You think you're so perfect, don't you?" he sneered, exhaling a cloud of smoke. Emily blinked, taken aback. "What are you talking about?" she asked, her voice trembling. Alex laughed bitterly, a sound devoid of humor. "You think I don't see the way you look at other guys? Always acting like you're too good for me?" Emily's stomach churned. She knew Alex had a jealous streak, but this was different. "That's not true," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "I love you, Alex." He turned to her then, his eyes dark and unforgiving. "You don't know the meaning of love," he spat before slamming his foot on the accelerator. The car lurched forward, the engine roaring as Alex sped down the empty street. Emily clung to her seat, panic rising in her chest. "Alex, stop! You're scaring me!" she cried. But he didn't stop. The speedometer climbed higher, and Emily's pleas fell on deaf ears. "You want to leave me? Go ahead," he shouted, his voice rising with fury. "But if I can't have you, no one will." Emily's heart pounded as she fumbled with her seatbelt, desperate to escape. The car swerved wildly, narrowly missing a lamppost. "Alex, please! You're going to kill us!" she screamed. His laughter was maniacal, a chilling sound that echoed in her ears. "Maybe that's the point," he said, his grip tightening on the wheel. In a moment of sheer terror, Emily managed to unbuckle her seatbelt. She reached for the door handle, but before she could make her move, Alex slammed on the brakes. The sudden stop sent her crashing forward, her head hitting the dashboard. Dazed and disoriented, she barely registered the sound of the driver's side door opening. Alex stormed around the car, yanking her out with brute force. "You think you can run from me?" he growled, his face inches from hers. Emily struggled against his grip, tears streaming down her face. "Alex, please, I don't want to fight," she sobbed, but her pleas only seemed to fuel his anger. He shoved her to the ground, the rough pavement scraping her skin. "You're nothing without me," he hissed, towering over her like a predator cornering its prey. As she lay there, broken and bleeding, a strange sense of calm washed over Emily. She realized in that moment that the man she had once loved was gone. The Alex she knew had been consumed by his demons, leaving behind a monster. Summoning every ounce of strength she had left, She pushed herself to her feet. "I'm done," she said, her voice firm despite the pain. "I'm done being your punching bag." For a brief moment, Alex seemed taken aback, but then his expression darkened and he lunged at her with a ferocity that took her breath away. Emily turned and ran, her legs carrying her as fast as they could. She didn't know where she was going. All she knew was that she had to get away. The sound of Alex's footsteps echoed behind her, growing louder with each passing second. Her lungs burned, her vision blurred, but she didn't stop. She couldn't stop. Suddenly she felt a sharp pain in her side as Alex tackled her to the ground. "You think you can leave me?" he snarled, pinning her down. "You're mine, Emily, do you hear me?" Emily fought back with everything she had, her nails clawing at his face, her fists pounding against his chest. But Alex was stronger, his rage giving him an almost inhuman strength. He struck her again and again, each blow stealing a piece of her life away. By the time he finally stopped, Emily was unrecognizable, her once vibrant spirit extinguished. Alex staggered to his feet, his hands trembling as he looked down at her lifeless body. Panic set in as the reality of what he had done began to sink in. He stumbled back to the car, his mind racing with thoughts of how to cover up his crime. After all, he was the son of a judge. People like him didn't go to prison. They didn't face consequences. But the universe had other plans. As Alex sped away from the scene, his car skidded on a patch of ice, crashing into a tree. He survived, but not without injury. When the police arrived, they found him bloodied and incoherent, the stench of alcohol heavy on his breath. It didn't take long for them to piece together what had happened. The trial was a media circus, with Alex's privileged upbringing and history of violence laid bare for the world to see. His father's attempts to shield him only made things worse, painting a picture of a man who had always believed himself to be above the law. In the end, justice was served, but it came too late for Emily. Her story became a cautionary tale, a haunting reminder of the dangers of ignoring red flags and the devastating consequences of unchecked privilege. And though her life was tragically cut short, her memory lived on, a beacon of hope for those who dared to break free from the chains of toxic love. The courtroom was packed during the sentencing, a sea of faces filled with anger, sorrow, and grim determination. Emily's parents sat in the front row, her mother clutching a photo of her daughter so tightly it seemed as though she believed it might bring Emily back. Her father, usually a pillar of strength, looked older, as if grief had stolen years from him. Alex, seated at the defendant's table, appeared a shadow of his former self. The once cocky young man who had strutted through life with an air of invincibility now sat slouched, his hands trembling as he avoided the eyes of the judge, jury, and the people whose lives he had shattered. The prosecution laid out every detail of Alex's descent. They spoke of the violent outbursts, the drunken rages, and the way he had manipulated Emily into staying with him through threats and empty apologies. Witnesses came forward, neighbors who had heard their fights, friends who had tried to intervene, and even former girlfriends who recounted eerily similar stories of Alex's possessive and abusive behavior. It became clear that Emily's tragic death was not an isolated incident, but the culmination of years of unchecked aggression and privilege. When it was time for the sentencing, the judge, a seasoned man who had seen countless cases, did not hide his disdain. "Mr. Thompson," he began, his voice stern and unwavering, "you represent the worst of what happens when power and privilege are abused. Your actions have destroyed a life, devastated a family, and scarred a community. And no amount of remorse or excuses can undo the damage you have done." Alex's lawyer had argued for leniency, citing his youth and the potential for rehabilitation. But the judge was unmoved. "This court will not tolerate individuals who believe they are above the law. You, sir, are no exception." He handed down a life sentence, ensuring that Alex would spend the rest of his days behind bars. As the gavel fell, a wave of emotion swept through the courtroom. Emily's mother wept openly, clutching her husband's hand as they found solace in the knowledge that justice, however bittersweet, had been served. Meanwhile, Alex was led away in handcuffs, his expression blank as if the gravity of his fate had yet to sink in. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed, their cameras and microphones aimed at anyone willing to speak. Emily's parents, after much deliberation, decided to address the crowd. Her father, his voice steady despite the tears streaming down his face, spoke of his daughter's dreams, her kindness, and the light she had brought to everyone who knew her. Emily's story, he said, is not just about tragedy. It's about the need to recognize the signs of abuse, to speak out, and to protect those we love. If sharing her story saves even one life, then her death will not have been in vain. In the weeks and months that followed, Emily's name became a rallying cry for domestic violence awareness. Her parents established a foundation in her honor, dedicated to supporting survivors and advocating for stronger laws to protect victims. Vigils were held in cities across the country, the glow of countless candles symbolizing hope and resilience. As for Alex, prison was a harsh reality he was wholly unprepared for. The privileges he had once taken for granted vanished, leaving him to face the consequences of his actions without the safety net his family had always provided. In the silence of his cell, he was left alone with his guilt and the memories of the life he had destroyed. Emily's friends, though deeply affected by her loss, found strength in each other. They carried her memory forward, sharing stories of her warmth, her laughter, and her unwavering belief in the goodness of people. Slowly they began to heal, their lives forever changed, but determined to honor their friend by living with the kind of courage and kindness she had always shown. Years passed, but Emily's story continued to resonate. Schools incorporated lessons on healthy relationships and the dangers of abusive behavior into their curriculums. Laws were amended to provide better protections for victims, and support systems for survivors grew stronger. Her parents, though forever grieving, found purpose in their advocacy, channeling their pain into a mission to ensure that no other family would have to endure what they had. And in a small town where a young woman once dreamed of a bright future, a park was dedicated in her name. At its center stood a statue of a phoenix rising from the ashes, a symbol of hope, resilience, and the enduring power of love. Beneath it, a plaque bore the words, "In loving memory of Emily Grace Carter, may her light guide us toward a world free from violence and fear." Though Emily's life had been tragically cut short, her legacy lived on, a testament to the strength of the human spirit and the unyielding fight for justice. Those who knew her carried her memory in their hearts, finding solace in the knowledge that even in death, Emily had made a difference. And so the world moved forward, carrying the weight of Emily's story as both a warning and a beacon of hope. Her parents, though forever marked by grief, dedicated their lives to advocacy, helping countless survivors find their voice and their strength. The foundation they established in Emily's name grew into a national movement, sparking reforms in domestic violence laws and creating resources for those in need. In her small hometown, the park dedicated to Emily became a sanctuary, a place where people gathered to remember her kindness and draw inspiration from her courage. The Phoenix statue at its center symbolized the resilience of those who rose above tragedy, its inscription reminding everyone that change was possible, even in the face of heartbreak. Alex, locked away in prison, faded from public memory. His story became a footnote, a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked privilege and the devastating consequences of rage. While he lived out his days in solitude, the world outside grew stronger, more vigilant, and more compassionate. Emily's friends carried her memory forward, channeling their pain into purpose. They shared her story widely, ensuring it would never be forgotten, and though her life was cut short, Emily's legacy endured, a testament to the enduring power of love, resilience, and the unrelenting pursuit of justice. In every life her story touched, she lived on, a light in the darkness that would never be extinguished.